The newest iPhone is the best. This is always going to be true, but is it really worth it? Today, I will review the iPhone 11 Pro Max, or as I call it, the iPhone 11 PM. Hello everyone, this is Matt from Real World Review, and I'm going to review another iPhone. This is my 5th iPhone I've reviewed, and I am tired. These iPhones are so similar, yet so different. Regardless, I don't want to downplay this awesome phone, but let's just talk about it. Let me know if you like the phone, like I do. The design is very familiar, yet different. I mean, look at all those cameras, with their own lenses and this little raised glossy part. Not to mention the matte finish on the back. On a big phone like this, the Apple logo is reasonably placed, but I can get how it can look a little bit weird on a smaller iPhone like the 11. The stainless steel around the phone is glossy, which I'm not a fan of, but I got used to it, along with the non-symmetrical antenna bands and speaker holes on the bottom of the phone, just like the iPhone XS Max. Notice there's still no headset jack. Speaking of the antenna bands, the phone does not support 5G of any sort, but it does support 30 more LTE bands and Wi-Fi 6, which surprised me. It also supports a U1 chip, which uses ultra-wideband technology to find other U1 devices around you. I don't know what that entirely means either, but short answer is that AirDrop will be faster and more efficient with devices with the U1 chip. The front is familiar, being glass with a notch on the top and an all-screen design. Those are Apple's words, not mine. All of these parts are supposed to be durable, but I wouldn't recommend throwing them on the ground. The display is amazing, yet very familiar. This year, they call it the Super Retina XDR display. When watching certain content, you may notice a difference, but really the screen has a much better contrast ratio and an 800 nit screen, as opposed to the 625 nit screen found in the iPhone XS Max. But for me, it's a very small difference. But it is still there. It can go up to 1200 nits when watching content, but for me, it never did that regardless of what I threw at it. The screen resolution is the same as the iPhone XS Max, which is between 1080p to 1440p. The phone is water resistant up to 4 meters for 30 minutes, but I wouldn't recommend throwing it in water either. We still have the lightning plug on the bottom, but at least Apple gives you an 18-watt charger in the box. I mean, $1,099 for this phone with a 5-watt charger is outrageous, but Apple did that last year. Going back to the camera lenses, I'm actually surprised that Apple made it look way worse than it really is. That camera bump is very minor and practically the same thing that you have on the iPhone XS Max. So this is probably the part you care about, right? It's the big changes that Apple and everyone else is focusing on, but I'll tell you what the specs are and show you some pictures and let you decide what's best. So we have 3 sensors. I will list all of them and all their specs on the screen, but note that all of them have 12 megapixel sensors and the ultra-wide sensor is 120 degrees. The phones that I will be comparing this to are the Samsung Note 10 Plus and the OnePlus 7 Pro, which have a 123 and 117 degree ultra-wide sensor, respectively. Also, on the 11 Pro Max and the Note 10 Plus, they have a 2x optical zoom, while the 7 Pro is technically 3x. Jeez, these are all long names. Okay, so let me just show you this list right here. There's an open patch because the iPhone 11 Pro is missing night mode with a wide-angle lens, and possibly the same for the 2x camera, though Apple acts like it does. Covering up the main sensor with the night mode does not switch you to the telephoto sensor, so that's why I'm assuming that we don't actually have night mode on that telephoto sensor. It's really weird. Anyways, let's start with the wide-angle sensor at night, no night mode, and now the standard sensor, again with no night mode. And lastly, the telephoto sensor with, you guessed it, no night mode. The wide-angle shot in the Note 10 Plus looks like the best to me, while the 11 Pro is actually the worst. Look at the detail of the 335 on the right. You can barely even see it on the iPhone, while on the Note 10 Plus, it's super clear. Standard sensor is fine, but the iPhone has this yellow tint for some reason. I like the car on the 7 Pro shot, but the Note 10 has the best overall shot. Now we go to the telephoto sensor, and on the Note 10 it looks oversaturated, but the iPhone and the 7 Pro have some really clear and true to life shots, but obviously the 7 Pro is zoomed in more. Then like I said, the 11 Pro Max does not support night mode with the wide angle sensor, so the Note 10 wins this one. Using the standard sensor with night mode on, I believe the Note 10 wins, with the iPhone a very close second because of the detail, but that Instagram looking filter does not look cool. Something to note for the iPhone 11 Pro is that night mode activates automatically and gives you varying times to set it if you want to, which is pretty cool. Then we have dark shots with no night mode on, and the OnePlus shows more light but the least amount of detail, and the iPhone loses hard on this one. But with night mode on, the iPhone gets put back into first, while the 7 Pro doesn't really do too well. This is a photo, not a painting. For the portrait shot on the back, I can't decide if the 7 Pro or Note 10 is better, but the iPhone didn't do so well with edge detection. Now, let's just go through these next shots, and I will show you what my favorites are, and I will list the sensor and the conditions above. Enjoy. Now let's move to the video camera in this quick video where I show you that the iPhone clearly wins simply because of the 3 phones that I was using, this is the only one with decent stabilization when shooting at 4K 60 frames per second. Speaking of, you can record 4K at 60 frames per second on the front camera, which is crazy to me. Still no optical image stabilization or focusing allowed on that sensor, but it's still not that bad. Also, you can switch from the wide-angle sensor to the standard sensor while recording, just like you can on the LG V30, which is cool, but The interesting thing is that you can't zoom in all the way when recording. Starting at the wide angle, 0.5, you can zoom in to 1.5 times, and that's it. Starting at the standard sensor, or 1x, you can go up to 3 times. Then if you start at the 2 times zoom, you can go all the way to 6 times zoom. Okay, that's all a 4K 60 frames per second thing, but here are the limitations on the other recording options. Okay, so this is the audio zoom on the iPhone 11 Pro. This is just me generally talking. This is how I talk into a microphone, not talking loud or anything like that. Does anything change? Anything sound better? Anything sound worse? Let me know. Not sure if you heard that, but audio zoom is supposed to give you better sound when zooming, which seems to be true, but not too much in my case. You can hear me a little bit better, but not enough to buy this phone for that reason alone. Portrait mode on the front is nice as usual, but adding more pixels doesn't always mean that it's going to come out better. Apple still does not have a focusable camera like I said before, which blows my mind. The Pixel 3 and Samsung phones like the Samsung S8 and newer have focusable cameras. The front camera is technically a wide sensor, and the gimmicky part is that when you turn it, the phone will turn into the wide angle, but you can always disable or activate it with this button here. Then we have the little stuff, well, to me at least. Okay, let me stop you there. What I was trying to say is that Slow-fi is a thing, but I don't understand it. The wide-angle sensor gives you a little preview to show you what you would capture if you're using the wide-angle sensor. Cool, but sometimes it doesn't stitch properly and it just looks kind of weird. Smart HDR is better this year. Hard to really show that, but when compared to the iPhone XS Max, it is better on the iPhone 11 Pro Max, just by a little bit, not too much. The camera app has a much better editor built in, but I'm not really a fan of editing on devices, so I don't really care too much about that. We now have some more settings easily accessible in the app, but only the photo and portrait options. Video recording options are still hidden in the settings app, which is outrageous to me. Quick take is how you do video on the fly or burst shot, but it only saves you maybe 1 or 2 seconds of the video aspect of it. Pointless to me, but it's whatever. It's also an iPhone 11 series exclusive for some reason. The True Tone camera flash on the back is 36% brighter, but I never really use it. All of the sensors and software mix to give you some awesome shots regardless of how you use it. But they can always be better next year. This phone is obviously going to be the fastest iPhone out there. Geekbench scores are outrageous whether you're talking about CPU or GPU scores. Everything you throw at the phone will be fast and reliable with very little lag. There's still some lag, but in rare situations to the point where I probably can't even replicate it on this video, which should tell you something. The A13 Bionic processor is a hexa-core chip up to 2.65 GHz, which is crazy because if Apple moves to octa-core, they could theoretically put out way more power than the competition for a couple of years. But I don't really know too much about that. Same with the small 4GB of RAM. Sure, it doesn't sound small, but 4GB was the same amount that was put into the Pixel 3, and lots of people complain about that. Still, Apple tunes their software to be able to push out more power out of all the components that they have to make it one of the most unstoppable phones out there. Well, kind of. When playing games, the phone heats up and will actually dim the screen. I don't like that, and it's very frustrating that it still happens. iOS 13 is good and very similar to iOS 12, and that's perfectly fine. Just like Android 9 to Android 10, most of the changes are going to be minor visual changes and lots of behind-the-scenes optimizations. I'm glad Apple understands that major change isn't always the best, especially if you do it every year. The spatial audio dual speaker setup is a little bit better. Enough to say it's one of the best speaker setups out there in a phone right now, because they are loud and do a decent job of giving you equal sound even though only one of the speakers is front firing. The top speaker is a little bit clearer when compared to the iPhone XS Max. This phone has a giant 3,969 mAh battery, which easily outperforms the larger Note 10 Plus battery in my tests. Here are some of the stats that I got from using this phone. Not bad at all. The second day I had this phone, I had 58 minutes of screen on time with 91% remaining, which is crazy. I remember using an iPhone 4 on low brightness years ago, barely being able to squeeze an hour of very light usage out of 10%, and now we have a phone that you can actually use that entire hour and only drain 10%. It's crazy to say that the iPhone 11 Pro Max is the best battery life I've seen in quite a few years, even beating the Moto Z2 Force. With all of this said, 2-day battery life shouldn't be difficult to do, but there's no chance of 3-day battery life without using heavy power saving options. Of course, this phone is not perfect, and I can understand that. This phone starts at $1,099 and at some point we have to put companies at fault for selling expensive phones with issues. This phone is heavy, and sure, it's because of the extra camera and larger battery, but still. Apple is no longer trying to make thinner phones, which I'm perfectly fine with, but they need to start focusing on making lighter phones. This is the heaviest phone that T-Mobile sells at 226 grams. This phone is 74 grams lighter than the iPad mini 5th generation. The thickness is not an issue, but the weight is way too much for this phone. This phone is more than double the weight of the iPhone 5. Okay, let's move on. I think you get it. Face ID is alright. It is faster, and I would love to have both Face ID and Touch ID, but it kind of works. Clearly, it's more secure when compared to non-3D recognition phones, but other phones like the OnePlus 7 Pro open up not only faster, but easier when compared to the iPhone 11 Pro. I mean, you can even have the OnePlus 7 Pro and the Note 10 upside down and it'll read your face fine, but the iPhone 11 Pro barely even allows you to tilt the phone, and even then, it doesn't really work that well. Apple says that it opens at more angles, but this is the farthest angle that it would go before it didn't recognize my face. That's not that good. I mean, on the OnePlus 7 Pro and even on the Note 10, you can literally have the phone upside down and it'll still recognize your face. Speaking of cameras, see these camera humps? Why? Because Apple wants to be different. Yes, Scratchgate is still a thing with these phones, and now it's even worse. Apple literally will never learn. The deletion of 3D Touch isn't that bad, but now the phone just feels cheaper. And they're saving what, $2, $3? That's how much the price difference is from the iPhone 6 to the iPhone 6s, part-wise, for me at least. So Apple is saving even less money. Haptic touch? Come on, Apple. All that the phone is doing is vibrating when you're holding something. Don't let Apple fool you on that one. Also, it seems to be slower than 3D Touch, which is annoying. Something about this phone is just kind of boring. iOS 13 is very similar to iOS 12, so don't expect a completely different phone. And some stuff like the redesigned share page and Apple moving the app updates page can get really annoying because they should have just all been left alone. Also, why do the folders dim? It doesn't make sense to me. Let me also say that this phone is the Pro model, yet it doesn't have a 120Hz Pro Motion display like they do on the Pro models of the iPads. Annoying that we're stuck with 60Hz, while the OnePlus 7 Pro and the OnePlus 7T for that matter gives you 90Hz. The software and performance are very similar to the iPhone XS Max, so moving from that will be kind of disappointing, especially if you spend another $1,099 on this phone. I haven't used the iPhone XS Max for over a year, yet this iPhone 11 Pro Max feels just like that same phone. If you have the money, buy the iPhone 11 Pro Max. Really, the major changes are the cameras and battery life because the processing power is already awesome on the iPhone XS Max. I love the matte finish on the back, and it actually wasn't as slippery as it seems. Still, I recommend a case. With the matte back, clear cases actually look cooler now, to me at least. The software is somewhat weird at times, but that applies to all iPhones with iOS 13. If you're moving from the iPhone XS Max, you might as well call this phone the iPhone 11 PM. Because this phone makes you feel like it's 11 PM when you use it. Okay, that's my last joke. And that's it for the iPhone 11 Pro Max, the best phone Apple has created, because it should be. Can you imagine how awesome it would be if Apple came out with a new iPhone and was like, the iPhone 11 Pro is the second best iPhone we've ever made. The iPhone XS was technically better. I think it'd be funny. If you want me to review something, let me know in the comment section along with any other questions you have, or message me on Twitter at MattofRWR. And feel free to follow me on the social media listed above, as well as subscribing for more review and repair videos. And hit that bell button so then YouTube reminds you when a new video does come out. Thanks for watching.